unbelievable how chronic the shortage of skilled labor is in this country.
Remember, we have a shortage of labor.
Every headline says the same thing. America doesn't have welders, machinists, and builders.
All of that work relies on attracting 100,000 new workers over the next couple of decades.
That's not just a number, that's a mission. A call to serve, a $260 billion operation looking for American hands and minds. Behind the Navy ships and submarines are thousands of small businesses, from one-person welding shops to tech startups, keeping our defense industry moving. A lot of our listeners are small and medium-sized businesses. How can they play a role in some of the work that the Navy's doing?
Small businesses are really important part of that team that serves our national security.
The news says there's a shortage, but the truth is there's an opportunity. Hundreds of thousands of jobs for Americans ready to build. If you want to be a part of that future, start here. Watch the full conversation with Eric Raven on the GovCon Giants podcast. All right, if you could just introduce yourself, first and last name, please.
Sure. My name's Eric Raven. I am the former Undersecretary of the Navy, serving from 2022 to 2024. Previous to that, I served 23 years in the United States Congress as a staffer at different levels. Much of that time following the defense budget, in fact, writing the annual budget funding bills for the Department of Defense. And currently, I'm a managing director at Beacon Global Strategies, a consulting firm working with all sizes of defense clients.
Wow. So, yeah, I had a chance to review that long, extensive career. And it's interesting because I think a lot of times people do not know what is an undersecretary for the Navy. What does that even mean? We hear about these things, but we don't really know what that means. Can you kind of tell people what it is, that role, and what does that mean to the general public?
Yeah, absolutely. So the role I served in as Undersecretary of the Navy was basically the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Management Officer for the Navy and Marine Corps. A lot of listeners might not understand that there's a civilian layer of oversight at the Pentagon, and we work alongside military leaders. And the Department of the Navy is unique in that it's an organization composed of two military services, both the Navy and the Marine Corps. So sailors and Marines all across the world, they are supported by the management efforts carried out by the Secretary of the Navy and the Undersecretary of the Navy, who's the number two in the organization.
And so, for example, what were some of your top priorities of accomplishing under that role?
Yeah, so a lot of the duties for an undersecretary really fall in the day-to-day management of the department. And the scope of the department is really breathtaking if you break it down. So in the Department of the Navy, it was about a $260 billion annual budget. It was nearly 900,000 people all across the globe. I mean, really almost in every single country. We have sailors and Marines serving somewhere in the world, but 900,000 sailors, Marines, and civilians working in the department, not to mention the many, almost countless number of contractors who are supporting those service members. And so in that role of the day-to-day management, it would be things as diverse as representing the interests of the Navy and Marine Corps to the Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the most senior levels of the Pentagon. There was a lot of work on the budget. There's a saying in Washington, budgets aren't just about money. They're a reflection of your priorities. What comes first in the budget and what gets funded shows that something is a top priority for those owning the budget. And if it's not funded, it might not be a non-priority, but you have to make tough choices to figure out, where the money goes first and what you can afford given limitations. Nobody has an unlimited checkbook. And there's a lot of other day-to-day issues that would come up. A couple of the initiatives that I was particularly proud of was that as the Navy had recruiting challenges over the last several years due to a variety of factors, I was put in charge of a task force by the Secretary of the Navy to look at recruiting practices, how we're reaching out to Americans all across this country, what can we do better on advertising, how to smooth the process. There's an awful lot of bureaucracy involved in recruiting.
Right.
If somebody wants to sign up, it's not just, sign on a piece of paper and ship them off to boot camp the next day. No, they got to go through medical procedures or medical examinations and all sort of stuff. Okay. And surprise, surprise, that's not always the smoothest running operation. So this task force looked at all the ways we could improve recruiting, from attracting young Americans to how to make sure we get them out to boot camp on time.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think a lot of us think about that, right? I mean, many of us have family members, particularly, I have two brothers that served. A lot of us I know have family members, direct or indirect, that serve, friends. And so we don't think about the process of applying, right, and going through to get into that. And I never even considered until you just mentioned it. Tell me, since we talked about the budget, telling you where your priority was at, a lot of our listeners are small and medium-sized businesses. How can they play a role in some of the work that the Navy's doing?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The whole Department of Defense really is reliant on building teams.
Okay.
And that can happen in military units with officers leading non-commissioned officers and sailors and Marines under them doing like really big things all across the world. And the teamwork that the military can bring to really hard national security problems, whether it's a crisis abroad or, even serving disaster response here at home, that really relies on teamwork. But one underappreciated element of the teamwork is the teamwork that happens between the government and companies in the national security sector or the services sector, because everybody in uniform somehow depends on some contract somewhere to do really important things, whether that's refuel jets or make sure that the dining facility has food for our troops. And so small businesses are really important part of that team that serves our national security. And just the diversity, I think it's tens of thousands of small businesses have some contract with the Department of Defense to do just a variety of different things. And making sure that small businesses are aware of the opportunities that are out there to do business with the government. And I would say, just as importantly, small businesses and their leaders understanding how much they contribute to our national security and our troops and keeping our nation safe.
Are there any particular underutilized entry points that businesses can make when trying to break into the Department of Defense or an organization like yours?
Yeah, great question. And for all of those trying to navigate the system, it was not built to be easy. There are an awful lot of challenges.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We appreciate that. I think a lot of people would like to hear that coming from someone of your stature, your nature. So that's good. Thank you.
No, there's a wide understanding, and I think this goes to the highest levels of the Department of Defense, that doing business with the government isn't easy. And from finding the opportunities to all the certifications and hoops you have to jump through,
sure,
to maintain currency on a wide variety of issues.
Sure.
That's not easy. So, I mean, my first message is to small business leaders is always bear with us. We're trying to make the system better. Everybody was trying to make the system better. But for as many rules that are out there, they're there for some reason. Somebody did something in the past, and so somebody came up with a new rule to close some loophole or make sure something ran smoother. But I would definitely say that being active and engaged in outreach is one of those key elements of success for small businesses looking to work with the government. It's not just about those opportunities that are posted on a website and you can go through the bid and go through the process. Being engaged and trying to understand your customer, what they need, and finding opportunities to engage with the contracting officers or the acquisition system, that's really important. And I think over the last several years, especially in the Department of Defense, I can say that there's a lot more effort being put into reciprocating those efforts to reach out. I'll just speak for the Department of the Navy for a second, but almost every week out of the year, maybe I'm being a little aggressive, maybe every other week, there is some event organized by the Office of Small Business Programs that's reaching into a variety of different states, major metropolitan areas, to try and connect small businesses with the folks in the Navy who need what those businesses are offering. And so take advantage of those, whether it's major conferences like Gold Coast is a major Navy conference in San Diego each year. In fact, I think it's coming up in a couple of weeks here. There's an old phrase about 80% of success is showing up. Just being able to be present, look for those opportunities to engage face to face with the folks in government who are trying to help businesses navigate this complex system is one of those really important elements of success.
And I would say that I have found a lot of success working with the Navy as a small business, and you are correct. I have found that team to be incredibly helpful and to be incredibly easy to reach out to and talk to and communicate with. So I do second everything that you said. We've had extreme success with breaking in and talking to decision makers. And you're right, Gold Coast is an event that I've participated in successfully, and like people are sitting around waiting to talk to you. So believe it or not, they are waiting to talk to you, and they're active and they're engaged and they're looking for small businesses. So.
And when I was undersecretary, again, I left that position just about a year ago now. But going out to Gold Coast was something that I did. I was there. I think it was 2023. I made a visit, but every year, the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, would make a priority that he wanted senior Navy leadership present at that and similar conventions and conferences to be able to connect. Because look, the small business team, I was really excited when you said that, Eric, about Navy being accessible. But sometimes the senior leaders need to hear it straight from small businesses what their concerns are. And I just got to add one more thing here. You asked about some of the initiatives that I was really happy to push forward when I was in office. And one of them was that President Biden had put together aggressive targets for expansion of small business opportunities.
Okay.
And every year there was an expectation that, X% of contracts should be to small businesses. And it was even broken down to even smaller targets, veteran-owned businesses, small and disadvantaged businesses, A-days, and so forth. Right. And every year those targets would go up. You had to work a little bit harder to get those targets.
Sure.
And I was really excited that during my time in office, through the leadership of the Navy Small Business Programs Office, that we were able to meet those targets. I think once or twice we came awful close, like within 0.1% or something like that. But I'll call those wins. And that was great just to be able to diversify where the Navy can get its work done.
You know what? I think we met.
You think so?
You know what? As you're saying that, let me ask you a question. Did you host a roundtable at Gold Coast for mid-tier businesses?
I did.
Aha!
With our East Washington.
Yeah. I was at that roundtable event at Gold Coast, and I remember that because I sat along the back wall.
Okay.
You probably don't remember me. I was filming a guy in that thing, and they asked if we could film in there, and I said yes, as long as you didn't film like the conversations. Yeah, you held a mid-tier roundtable at Gold Coast 2 years ago. I was in the room. And I was in a room. I was in a room with a friend of mine. They do a lot of work there. His name was Salex is the company's name. But yeah, I was in that mid-tier roundtable discussion that you hosted at Gold Coast.
Well, people say a lot about Washington, D.C., but you run into friends all over the place, don't you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As you said that, I was like, because when I saw your face, we've met before. And that was it. You hosted a mid-tier roundtable event at Gold Coast.
Yeah, but that's just an example of, kind of like best practices. And it came right from the top. Again, the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, who was my boss there, he had a distinguished career in the Navy. He commanded a destroyer, which is a huge responsibility. He worked on some really interesting acquisition programs. And after he retired from the Navy, he started his own small business in the kind of technology sector.
Right.
Very successful. And so when he became Secretary of the Navy in 2021, he was very, very firm that he wanted to see a level playing field, get more small business engagement, and for a variety of reasons. One, he lived and breathed it. When people came to him and talked about the contracting challenges or the cost accounting standards, he was right shoulder to shoulder with them about how we need to make it easier to do business with the government. And he watched those numbers on small business spend like a hawk.
Yeah.
So he was
Really?
trained, and it was great to be part of that team.
I heard great things about him. I never met him before. But one of the things that I saw that your small business team did that was unique was when they spoke publicly, they said, hey, from the leadership down, if you submitted an RFI or sources sought, we want to know it. Okay. And that was a policy that I've never heard anyone say that except from the Department of the Navy, that they said, if you submitted an RFI or sources sought, we want to know that and you're a small business, send it up to us so we can have a record of it. So we're tracking that you actually did respond to some market research requests. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, that's great. When I was talking about teamwork and, small businesses really being part of the national security team, one of the challenges I found working in the Pentagon was that there are best practices out there all over the place. The Army does things a little bit differently. Air Force does things a little bit differently. Navy does things a little bit differently. And one of the challenge for leaders is to be able to be agile and responsive. When somebody cracks the code on how to do something better, how do you take those best practices and change your own system to something where others are excelling? And I think that responsibility really falls to not only those who are leading small business programs, but leaders as well. One other thing that really stands out for me during my time in the Pentagon and working on small business programs with that team is that there was established a small business champion or advocate and champion in each one of those buying commands that we talked about earlier, where if you go to NAVAIR, there was not just the Office of Small Business Programs, but there was somebody, way high up in the chain, usually a very senior SES, who would work alongside the leader in the small business programs to make sure that the goals of the Secretary of the Navy and the commander and all of those in government were really being carried out. And I thought that was a really great insight because I'll tell you, again, I talked about the size of the Navy, nearly 900,000 people, $260 billion budget. Honestly, small businesses are not always on the forefront of that must-do priority list of what needs to be paid attention to. Mm-hmm. But the more you can make it leaders' business to follow those issues, mm-hmm. the more responsiveness you get throughout a very large and complex system.
I'm glad you brought that up because that brings up another point. When we're looking at like defense appropriations, how do people find out where future funding is going to go so that we can kind of be ahead and we know who we should be talking to or who we should, like you said, engaging with, the particular persons or the decision makers? How do we know that stuff? I mean, where do we go? Where do we start? What do you recommend?
So it is a really complex thing to try and sift through all the tea leaves and understand where the priorities are going, and if you need to shift gears or change some priorities to be responsive to the customer, that can be a big challenge. And I think that's yet another example of how sometimes it's very difficult to do business with the government is just tracking changing priorities. The number one thing that I would emphasize is it's not necessarily about opening up defense budget bill and looking at some numbers and trying to figure out what it means. That's a really complicated task, even for professionals.
Okay.
But I would say the most productive way to understand the big problems that leaders in the Pentagon are trying to solve is by looking what they say and what they do. And for example, Secretary Hegseth, one of his priorities right now is restoring warfighting capability or elevating warfighting capability. Okay. What that says to me is the priorities for the Department of Defense are increasingly focused on how to field those technologies and capabilities that really relate to the job that our service members are doing, every day on their ships, airplanes, and their tactical units and so forth. And so things in kind of like what I would call more of the support activities, whether that's enterprise services and IT and stuff like that, none of that's going to go away. But if you want to track where the growth is going, it probably leans more towards those technology solutions that have to do with more teeth, less tail. That's a phrase often used in the Pentagon. And what that means is giving service members who are standing in the line of danger, ready to do their mission 24/7, giving them more tools to do their job and focusing less on kind of like the needs of the bureaucracy, and shifting that ratio of how much gets invested in the tail rather than the tooth of the dragon is probably one of those critical messages that leadership is sending right now.
And that's an interesting way to look at it, right? You're kind of like reading between the lines, which is helpful because we can't read the lines because like you said,
no, it's true.
We can't actually read the lines, so we got to read in between the lines, right? So that's interesting. So given the pace of technological innovation, right? Obviously, everyone's talking about AI, machine learning. I know that those are some of the areas that you focus on. What are some of the Are we changing our acquisition strategies for that? Or, I mean, I know that under this administration, they had an executive order that talked about OTAs, but I think you guys were already using OTAs previously, right? What are some of the adapting acquisition strategies or that you're seeing, or maybe policy shifts along those lines that can help get some of that stuff out to the warfighters faster?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a trend, I would say, over the past 10 or 15 years to figure out more flexible ways to do business with the government. And it probably comes down to two main ideas. One is that it's hard to get new ideas and new technology, to grab government's attention to new ideas and new technology.
Sure.
Like just breaking through the old way of doing things, or we've always relied on this system to do X, Y, and Z. But the fact that there's now alternatives, whether that's leveraging advanced technologies like AI, or just that software capabilities are constantly evolving and you got to keep on top of the state of the art. Getting government's attention to the new technologies and new opportunities has certainly been highlighted as one of those issues over the past many years that we just have to do a better job on. I personally think that while there's a lot of focus on defense disruptors, think about the Palantirs and Andurils who want to do something different than the big primes. I'm rooting for everybody in this initiative. But the one thing I would say is I'm especially rooting for small businesses, because look at the history of the United States, look at the history of how DoD does business. Those SIBRs and SITRs very often go to those new breakthrough technologies that might not be ready for adoption in the next 6 months or 18 months, but they lay the groundwork for some really incredible breakthrough technologies. And so kind of getting more of those ideas into the ecosystem is one big trend over the past decade or so. The other trend that I would point out is once you have the new ideas that are starting to grab hold in the ecosystem, military leaders are aware of some technology out there and what it can bring to them. How do you take that from, building and buying, 1, 2, 5, or 10 of something to buying 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 of whatever that thing may be? So the issue of being able to scale fast is increasingly coming to the fore. And I think the looks at how to embrace more commercial contracting practices, not just that very complex DoD 5000, defense acquisition system that has so many rules, but how to tilt the system towards more commercial practices. Sure. So it's easier to do business and it's easier to get businesses in a position to scale their offerings. That's the other key initiative that I think has been consistent through the last several years. And I think that trend is probably going to continue.
I like that. Let's switch over. I want to talk about national security and defense strategy. Where do you see some of the biggest national security challenges facing the U.S. today that everyday Americans should be paying attention to?
We were talking about this just a moment ago. I listened to the podcast you had where you had Frank Kendall on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Frank Kendall is an amazing national security leader. Most recently served as Secretary of the Air Force, had served in quite a number of Pentagon positions during his career, started off as an Army officer. He mentioned that he's writing a book about the future of warfare. And by the way, I really encourage all your listeners to go back and listen to that episode from a couple of weeks ago. He's a really big thinker. The main thing that I would point out, and I'm pretty sure Frank would be on the same page, is that the changes in American national security over the last several decades have really been pretty notable. I mean, when I was growing up, there was the Soviet Union and a lot of concern about two giant powers competing all across the globe. And then come 1989, the wall fell, the Soviet Union crumbled.
I remember
It all
that.
went away.
Yeah.
No, the world changed almost overnight. And then came 9/11, and this country really mobilized to tackle the threat of violent extremism. And once again, the world changed overnight. The world is changing in a different way right now, I think. It's not an overnight change where I don't think we're going to, wake up, some morning and see a drastically different national landscape that happens in the snap of the fingers. What I'm seeing is that, especially with the rise of China, where China has gone from being a backward, poor nation, struggling with its own prosperity and economy, to being a driver of economic and technological change. And that encompasses not only how they've developed internally, but what that means on the national security landscape. China's growing in its influence and power. And again, I don't expect a sudden change overnight, but I think it's really worth paying attention to these trends and how our countries are developing and interacting with each other, where China clearly has ambitions to reach out, touch other portions of the world in ways we haven't seen other countries do in many, many decades. Their ambitions to reunite with Taiwan are plainly evident because their leaders speak about it all the time. And their growth in military power, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, has been very, very significant. And while this is not something you'll pick up and read in a headline one day, the trends of where China is going and how we secure not only our national security, but our vision of economic development, liberty, freedom, and what that means to the rest of the world, I am increasingly concerned we're on a collision path with a country that seems to have a very different view of how the world should work than what we hold dear.
Yeah, no. Let me ask you, I know that you led some of the largest investments ever in Navy shipbuilding and major infrastructure development, particularly in Guam and Indo-Pacific. Is that part of that effort? Was that part of that? Or is that, what was the thought process behind why we're doing that, right? I think a lot of times we don't know, as people sitting home, like, why are we doing this stuff? Why are we going these places, right?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this money?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to throw some big thoughts at you here for a second. But look, go back to the very founding of our country. The fate of the United States has always been very closely linked to the oceans. Even in the last century or so much of the strength of the United States has been on our ability to trade with our friends and allies. Things are changing. During World War II, the Navy had a fleet of thousands of ships. We had commercial shipping that was the envy of the rest of the world. And as the world economy developed, this nation kind of took its eye off the ball on what it means to be, in the Navy, the phrase is used, a maritime nation. It's not just about the number of battleships or carriers that the Navy has. It's about our ability as a nation to tap into the commerce that rides on the ocean. Trillions of dollars of goods go through our oceans every year, either to reach our shores or to go elsewhere in the world. And that's not just oil or commercial technologies, consumer goods and things like that. It's everything you can imagine travels on the ocean. And so over the last few years, I think that there's been a reawakening, really by both parties and a lot of economic thought leaders, that the United States really ought to be investing more in connecting itself to the oceans. And so in the Navy, we invested significantly greater amounts in building up our naval fleet. And that's to, maintain the security of the seas and advance American interests and keep us safe. But there's also now a lot of questions in Washington about how can we do the same thing on the commercial front. Again, the U.S. used to be a preeminent shipbuilder, and now U.S. construction of ships is something like 0.1% of the global market. Wow. 0.1%. China now controls, depending on who you listen to, about 50%. Japan and South Korea control about another, 48% or something like that. And the US is building 0.1% of all the ships that are on the oceans right now. And so this administration, just like in the previous administration, we're working, everybody has been working to figure out how to change that around. And that really that's not just about building a bigger Navy, that's building a better commercial sector, strengthening shipbuilders, bringing in the trades that are necessary to do better, and really putting some money on the table to changing that narrative around to make ourselves the naval power, the naval and maritime power that we have been throughout our history.
It's interesting about that. I was looking at the Y Combinator's list of companies they want to invest in, and one of them was someone that can take and create AI models that can train workers in the trades so that they can help us accomplish some of these goals and tasks, so that we can trade up welders, HVAC mechanics, plumbers. We can train them up much faster to be able to serve us and helping with some of these efforts. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and you're hitting on a great point that people are really at the heart of this, like so many other issues that we're dealing with. If there's one magic wand moment, king for a day sort of wish that I would certainly have, it's how to get Americans really interested in these opportunities that are out there, especially in the trades, but many other areas as well, where I think increasingly it's kind of hard to tell the story about what different careers mean to people in this day and age. I've visited many shipyards over my career, nearly 27 years in national security. And it's really inspiring to see, first of all, like how many people are out there building ships because their father, their granddad, their
Right.
aunts, their uncles were in that line of business. And it's really inspiring. Like it can be like a true family calling, especially on the Gulf Coast. But that's not sufficient. Look, this country needs more welders, whether they're welding ships or building high rises or fixing tractors or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There's a real gap there, but I think it's really important to be able to tell that story about the good jobs that are out there that aren't just like killing time for the next thing, but can really be careers and have a future in them.
No, I would agree with you. And I think, didn't you go to University in Connecticut, I believe?
Yeah, Connecticut College.
Yeah, so Groton Sub Base is there.
Exactly.
Right, and so yeah, we've done work at Groton Sub Base, and then around the corner, you've got the big shipbuilding facility up there. Oh my gosh, it escapes me. Right between right outside.
There's Electric Boat.
Electric Boat. There you go. That's what I was thinking. Electric Boats right there, right before you get to Newport Naval Base. Yeah.
So if you look behind me, it's just off the screen. There's a picture right up here. You can just barely see it.
I'm gonna put you away.
I don't think it's in the camera view, but trust me, it's there. That is a picture of the first nuclear powered submarine that was ever launched, and that was kind of like a commissioning ceremony where all these distinguished admirals and statesmen and so forth came up to see this submarine be launched, and that was from Electric Boat in Groton. And the reason I like to have that up there is also because Connecticut College is just on the other side of the river. And when I was going to school there, I could look down on the hill, like across the river, and see Electric Boat. And they were building some really incredible submarines over there at the time. So it's just kind of like a little reminder of where I've been, and also kind of the really cool things that the shipbuilders can do.
Yeah, no, I went to a couple of industry days down there, and I mean, it floored me to the level of how they knew how many people they needed. Like in 2028, 2030, hey, we need 5,000 people to build this next level. Like they knew down to how many hours, how many people we were short, right? And so it was just fascinating, the intricacy of what they knew and what they could predict, and the shortage, and how we had to try to solve for it today, because some of these submarines, they were building bigger facilities and bigger infrastructure to support these now much larger subs that have more capacity. So I found that fascinating. I think again, a lot of people listening to this, they have no idea. They just see us well, I say see us because I feel like I'm part of this thing, but they see obviously people like yourself spending money. They don't really understand what's going into the dollars that are being spent.
You're tapping on a great point, is that explaining the scope and scale of some of these big things is really kind of like mind boggling, and it doesn't come intuitively. And for all my decades in government, seeing how when this nation pulls together, we can do really big things together is always inspiring. But just, you touched on a couple of really interesting points there. So building submarines, the Navy is really accelerating efforts to build more submarines for a variety of reasons. But, mentioned earlier that China's growing military power is very significant. One area where the United States holds like a huge advantage in technology and capability are submarines. We build the best submarines in the world, hands down, no question. And to be able to do that, the submarine industrial base, which is not only those big shipyards in Connecticut and Virginia, but a supply chain of nearly 17,000 suppliers in all 50 states, including I don't even know how many small businesses as part of that supply chain. All of that work relies on attracting 100,000 new workers over the next couple of decades. 100,000 new Americans being drawn into this. But the scope and scale of kind of like what these submarines are, is also really impressive. To build one submarine, a Virginia-class submarine, which is kind of the premier submarine right now, takes somewhere around 10 million work hours. So think about that. One individual working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, and multiply it by that many. 10 million work hours to assemble all the parts to build a submarine. It is truly a huge endeavor.
Wow. So there are real job opportunities for Americans in defense and national security beyond serving uniform. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the variety of roles that people can serve in, I think is also like one of those untold stories. We talked about the need for more Americans to become interested in the trades, welders, electricians, and so forth. It's not just for the defense industrial base, it's for economy at large. Boy, if you've ever done any home renovations lately, getting a plumber to come out to your house can sometimes be really difficult. We need that across the board. We need Americans interested in that, but it's a lot broader than that. And one of the reasons I've always been interested in the Department of Defense throughout my career is it's almost like a little government unto itself. You think about what government does for you. You have people who take care of the roads, run schools, pick up the trash, all these kind of basic day-to-day things. There's people in the Department of Defense who have to provide those exact level of services to troops, not only in the U.S. but all across the world. And so think about everything from the contracting experts to the accountants to the teachers and daycare workers, even just working in our national security sector with the Department of Defense. There's opportunities in all those areas and more. I'll tell you one of my frustrations here.
Sure.
So many of those opportunities, you can go to usajobs.gov and look at jobs or opportunities in your area, and it's a great compendium, but once again, kind of hard to use, kind of clunky. It looks like it's been around for 20 or 30 years. Yeah. I think it would be a great initiative for the U.S. government to find some new ways to reach out to Americans, to tell the stories of all those opportunities that are out there, whether it's working for the government or elsewhere, that doesn't rely on a web interface that's pretty out of date, to be honest.
I appreciate you saying that. It reminds me of a couple things. One, I always thought the government should be making more movies about like all the good things that we're doing, right? Like, NASA does a really good job of selling NASA. Okay. Totally. If you want to benchmark yourself, benchmark against NASA. Okay. People watch NASA. They watch rockets take off, they do an amazing job because when I had my event conference last year, everyone was so excited about SpaceX. Not even that they cared to work with SpaceX. They were like, oh my God, regular people know SpaceX. I'm sorry, Space Force, excuse me. Yeah. regular people know Space Force. They don't know what they do, but they're like, Space Force is cool, and they have an emblem, and they, like they have characters. They have their own theme music. So I think they're a good example. But you're right. When I look at places like Nico, the website, I mean, it's such a, the user interface is not good. The GUI, all of that stuff is like very challenging. And the same thing with USA Jobs. All of the sites to get any information from the government are very challenging to operate.
Hey, I'm going to put a pitch in for Navy recruiting right now. I mean, this is pretty shameless, but you really teed it up.
Go for it.
One of the most interesting things that I was able to see is, Navy recruits across all 50 states, even overseas for Americans, who may be living in certain countries abroad.
Okay.
And, maybe you have an individual who graduates from high school, is looking for opportunity. Maybe they're interested in the Navy. Maybe, somebody in the family served, or they saw a really cool ad or something like that, and they sign up. The number of opportunities is really mind blowing. And the one that just really stands out to me is, again, I'm going to talk about submarines. We're going to beat this horse to death together. Nope. To run a nuclear submarine, you have to have highly trained engineers who knows how a nuclear reactor works. Not only when things are going well, but they have to know what to do when things aren't going well.
Sure.
And an awful lot of those experts are men and women just out of high school. They're interested in the Navy. They've heard something about submarines. They're not worried about being in a steel can far beneath the ocean. And they are trained from step one to being a professional in how to run a nuclear reactor. And it's an amazing process. I mean, they learn about how to take apart electronics, or, what the reactor needs at any particular moment. And, they didn't go to MIT.
Right.
They don't have those advanced degrees.
Right.
The Navy takes these folks in. Now, you got to be very good to go into that nuclear program.
Sure.
But after about a year and a half, 2 years of training, you become a nuclear expert. And you can serve our nation. And then, if you want to continue serving the Navy, absolutely. There's a career there for you. And some of those look out at commercial opportunities and say, oh boy, all these skills I've learned in the Navy about nuclear science and nuclear engineering, I can take that elsewhere and make, a pretty dang good salary. I'll tell you that. That was just always amazing to take a college graduate and within a very short period of time, turn out such a highly trained technical professional. It's really inspiring to watch.
No, I love that. And I've seen that. A lot of the people that I interview on my show, the top contractors, that's how they learn. They learn by being part of our military in some capacity, learning the skills, understanding how it works. And then they come out into the commercial world, and then they start small businesses that then go back and support the government. And then they hire and train other people to continue to do that. So I agree. I think that's a great path. So if you're listening, I think that's a great path for young people that are not sure what they want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of opportunities.
So let's talk, going back to your role under Secretary of the Navy. What was a difficult decision that you had to make, and how did you approach it?
It's a great question. And the reason I'm pausing here is because this is not just emblematic of working in the Navy or working in the Department of Defense or government, but any organization. When you get to senior levels, the questions you have to deal with, somebody else would have solved the easy problems a long time ago. It is always the toughest problems that go to the top in any organization. Working in the public sector, in public service, and in government is a huge privilege. Very proud of my career, but one of the challenges that I continually took on was the fact that our U.S. government is organized in a certain way, so that there's always some conflict on any issue that's going on. And let me tell you what I mean is that you go back to our Constitution, and it designed a government where no power was entirely put in the hands of one set of people. So you have the president leading the executive branch, you have Congress passing laws and doing oversight. And those two very large organizations, most of the time, have to come into agreement on really hard questions. And I've been fortunate in my career to be able to see that from both sides. Again, 23 years working in Congress, doing oversight of the Department of Defense, helping write its budgets, finding programs that were not working right and trying to turn them around. And then from my time in the Navy, just on the other side of the coin, trying to run programs as best as possible to deliver value not only to the taxpayers, but the folks in serving in uniform and the higher goal of national security. And look, the executive branch and Congress don't always see things the same way, whether that's a big issue or a small issue. And so during my public service, I've always tried to kind of break down those barriers. So it's not just saying like, he said, she said, or, people staking out different opinions and kind of like, throwing rocks at each other. Opening up the dialogue on tough problems so everybody can have their say. You better understand where other people are coming from, and trying to craft practical solutions to hard problems. That's a challenge that came up nearly every day when I was working in the Pentagon or in Congress on some issue, large or small. But it's really rewarding. I've taken pride that public service is a public trust, that people count on leaders all across government to do the right thing for the American people at large. That doesn't always mean doing the right thing for each individual person, but serving the American people and where our nation needs to go. And so working those challenging problems anywhere from the budget to recruiting to shipbuilding to just a range of other issues has been the challenges that a lot of my career has tackled, and that I'm very, very proud of.
Looking ahead, where do you see some of the most promising areas of growth or innovation for government contractors in the defense and aerospace sectors?
Well, one concrete area that I would certainly point out is Golden Dome. And this is the administration's effort to essentially provide a missile shield over the United States. Again, with just growing world tensions, there's increasing focus on whether the nation is vulnerable to those who seek to challenge us or those who might seek to attack us. And so this Golden Dome concept is basically to increase our protections against those who may want to do us harm. And this is a really ambitious, aggressive project. The president has said it may cost $175 billion over the next 3 years. That's a lot of money. Some others have looked at it and said maybe over 20 years, it might be as much as $500 billion. Those are huge investments. But where the opportunity is that to carry forward this vision and to make improvements in how we defend our nation, there's opportunities at all levels, from making the latest breakthroughs in things like artificial intelligence or sensing or how computers talk to each other, or even at the manufacturing level, how do you make solid rocket motors that are necessary for the rockets that would shoot down things that might cause our nation harm.
Right.
And so there's a real broad portfolio of opportunities within that. And the reason I highlight it is because it's such an important issue for the administration, that real resources are being devoted to moving that forward. Congress passed a bill a couple of months ago called the Reconciliation Bill that provided a $25 billion investment as kind of like a jumpstart to some of those technologies. Now, there needs to be a lot more money, and there's certainly a lot of like technological challenges of creating new technologies to fit into this vision that are yet to come. But that's one concrete effort that I would highlight as an opportunity. But more generally, the innovation space, like tapping into American ingenuity and innovation. We've always been the ones to change the game.
Right.
Whether that came to our, military technologies. You think about, GPS satellites that we all have on our phones.
Yeah.
Hey, that was made by the Pentagon.
Oh, no, that's awesome. I don't think people know that.
Hey, the internet that we're talking on right now and that our listeners are listening to, that came from the Pentagon too. Many years ago.
I remember that part. I know the internet. 802.11 came from the internet. I remember that when they released it to the public. I remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, while those were Pentagon projects, there's a lot of other innovation. Think of everything from the smartphone to self-driving cars that's going on out there. the opportunities to play in the innovation space where technology is just moving faster and faster each year. And in fact, I feel oftentimes like we have to, as people, catch up to where the technology is going. It's moving so fast. But that is another area that is really moving so fast and has so much emphasis, whether that's supporting government customers or innovating for our nation at large.
So now you move to the private sector. What's your role over at Beacon Global Strategies?
Yeah, it's a fantastic team. So Beacon Global Strategies is a national security consulting firm. We work with just a variety of defense, technology, financial services, and many other types of firms that play in the national security space. There's a saying here that national security is a shared responsibility between government and the private sector. While we look at our government leaders as driving the policy on how to make our nation secure, nobody actually delivers that until there's a business out there that's creating that next technology, that's building that airplane, that's building that ship, that's fielding those capabilities for our service members and folks in the intelligence agencies who keep us safe every night. So we work with a wide variety of clients, helping them navigate the government, helping them tell their stories of what they're doing, why what they're doing is important for leaders to understand and hopefully adopt.
Nice. After 2 decades in government, how do you stay optimistic about the future of our country?
I'm a big history buff.
Okay.
I studied history in graduate school. That was a little more international focus, but I love reading about the history of our country. And maybe I was just raised this way, but I look at the challenges that we've overcome and the challenges that we have today. There's something about this nation where, when the chips are down, we can pull together and tackle so many challenges. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it's fast. Right. But you know what? I think of Martin Luther King's quote. The arc of justice is long, but it bends in the right direction. I'm probably getting a couple words wrong there, but I think that's really the story of America. Is that we need to change, we need to adopt, we need to adapt to new circumstances. But I fundamentally think we are heading in the right direction as long as we can all work together. And I see that happening on projects big and small. Again, it's like really inspiring to see Americans, come together and serve our nation in uniform. It's also super inspiring to hear from that small business leader who has grown something from nothing and, achieved their own dreams and provided a great opportunity for not only themselves, but for other Americans to pitch in on their idea. And I think that there's just like so much to tap into if we're just smart about it and work together.
And again, we kind of touched, you said this earlier, but if you had a big billboard that you want to get a message out to the American people, what would you put on that billboard?
Find ways to serve. And that can be, again, it doesn't have to be serving in government. It doesn't have to be serving in the military or things like that. Serving your community, the simple act of volunteering in your neighborhood goes an awful long way. And it's not just about building a better nation for, all 320 million Americans or just the folks who are in your neighborhood. Service helps everybody, but there's also a sense of fulfillment that you can get through service when you take on big challenges, big or small. Whether that's helping out your kids in their classroom in elementary school to do that science project or whatever it might be, to tackling the really big issues facing our nation, giving a little bit to something that's beyond yourself helps expand your horizon, and I hope that that's something Americans can really adopt because we have a great history of doing it. We just need to keep that message alive.
Yeah. No, you're very personable, and I appreciate that. That's come across, and I'm happy to be able to talk about your history, your background, and share it with the world and our audience. This has been great, and I know that everyone's getting a lot of value out of it. So, right now, you're Beacon Global Strategies. Apparently, people can look you up and find all your information. Is there any place that you want people to reach out to you and contact you specifically?
I'm on LinkedIn, or you can go to the Beacon website and find my email address. But yeah, just love linking up with Americans and hearing what they're working on and what challenges they have. And by the way, Eric, just like I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time with you and not only share some of my story and some of my thoughts, and just really appreciate the conversation. Boy, we touched on quite a variety of topics. Really appreciate the you're a real 5-tool player in terms of asking a bunch of different questions, and wish you the best and the best to your listeners too.
Yeah, thank you. I will say, going back to innovation, I started doing podcasting in 2018. It wasn't very popular back then. Okay. And I struggled to get anyone from the government on for years and years and years. So when we talk about, right, them slowly adopting, finally, right, they're now starting to adopt podcasting as a medium to come on and tell their story. But I've been saying, hey, this is a way to leverage, right, something that's on everybody's phone, everyone's device. It's free, and to put your message out there, as opposed to, again, I know we go to conferences and events, those are great, but this is a free medium that's on all devices. So I've been telling that story now for going on 8 years. And so I'm happy now, finally, we're getting to people to understand this medium and leverage it and use it for the benefit, because, again, I think this helps us to connect with people that otherwise have not been to DC, not been inside the Pentagon. I mean, that's most of Americans. You know, I'd only been to see once before I became an adult, right?
I mean,
so,
people talk about meeting people where they are. That's literally what you're doing.
Yeah, we're meeting people where they're at. So
yeah.
So I appreciate the conversation. Look forward